Hi, I'm Jonathan Black. Today's topic is bullying at work. Now, this is an area that I work in a lot, and I know many watchers of these video segments will work in this area, and most people who watch this will have experienced bullying at some stage in the workplace, no matter what country we happen to be in. Typically, when we look at bullying, we're looking at the consequences of it. We're looking at shattered careers, we're looking at performance issues, we're looking at health issues, we're looking at a team that fractures, we're looking at sometimes significant psychological distress. We're looking at a whole range of factors, but usually after it's actually happened. And yet organisations often come to me wanting to know, Jonathan, that's fine, we can do counselling, we can do investigations, we can do all kinds of other bits and pieces. And that's in another video section entirely, of its own accord. But what about the systemic issues that we as an organisation can put in place that helps us, if not minimise bullying, then actually manage it more effectively and often with less of a human collateral cost to what can be a very difficult and a very trying process? Because in my experience, yes, people do make false claims of bullying, but they're not very often. And what they often do is make mistaken claims based upon a person told that they've actually been through. And often those mistaken claims are at least partially accounted for by a very blurred understanding of what bullying happens to be and a very blurred process inside an organisation about the steps taken to actually manage it effectively and actually address issues earlier on. So there are a couple of things I'd recommend for every organisation basically that would help in terms of minimising the occurrence of bullying, reducing its impact, and increasing the ability we have to manage it effectively, including the health and performance consequences and including our ability to exit people if necessary as well. Number one, we need to review our selection process. We need to take a closer look at behaviour and what it actually means. Now maybe that's the use of psychometrics. Maybe that's a better interview process. Certainly, typically it involves really taking a close look at the reference checks and how we actually do it. There's a way of looking at patterns of established behaviour in some people. Everyone is prone to change, everyone's prone to stress, everyone can lash out and get frustrated. But what we're really looking for are those individuals who have a pattern of dealing with disappointment, people they interpret as being obstacles, in a very inappropriate manner, and in a manner that they don't have a lot of insights into, and it's very reactive. In other words, they don't think before they act, they simply act to whatever is going on that's disappointing them or frustrating them at that particular point in time. I very rarely come across people who I classify as a typical bully. I often come across what I classify as bullying behaviour, and it's that behaviour that as an organisation we need to manage, but at the selection stage, it's very useful to be able to take a really good look at, hold on, what kind of people are we recruiting and hiring in the first place? And this good first impression people want to give us, do we have the ability to really kind of open the door behind that and take a good look at some of those more counterproductive behaviours that sometimes they've been able to hide in the selection process in the past. Number two, we need to define very clearly what bullying and harassing behaviour is. And that can be difficult because it's got to be broad enough that it can encompass a range of things. But certainly bullying and harassing behaviour has some commonalities. Typically it must be repeated. Generally speaking, it involves some kind of high level of personal distress that's directly related to the behaviour of somebody else, irrelevant of other factors that may have happened to confound it. The predominant cause of that distress is a behaviour of somebody else, and that can be very difficult to identify, I know. Usually it will involve some kind of power imbalance, hence why it's typically an employer towards an employee, but not exclusively by any means. You can have very influential individuals who in some way have got some kind of sense of power or ability to influence somebody else. That can happen. Usually it often requires some level of physical proximity or contact. If not, that people don't work together, and then people will come across each other, and that will heighten the feelings of intimidation. Bullying is not simply somebody who is aggressive. It can also be passive. It can also be people that mob behind people's back and create stories about them. It can also be people that don't actually recognise and reward good performance and good work, and that is used to undermine the credibility in the eyes of others. So while it's a very complex issue, certainly defining it becomes very, very important, and trying to really kind of nut it out a bit is very important for organisations in terms of what exactly bullying and harassing is here, including concrete examples of that kind of behaviour. Thirdly, we need to pay attention to the company or team culture. A few years ago, I gave a conference paper on workplace bullying, and someone in the audience asked me a very smart question, and that question was, Jonathan, what causes bullying? Is it the bully themselves, or is it the culture that they happen to work in? And I believe, like most people do, that we're responsible for our own behaviour. We make our own choices, and indeed we do. But in reality, it's the culture that enables or allows a certain kind of behaviour to either go unnoticed or go unchallenged. And one of the big challenges we have as managers is how do we develop those skills to have those hard conversations early on when we don't want to be embarrassed, or we don't want to feel like we're crying wolf, but actually raising those issues about someone early on is actually really important and a really valuable management skill. Number 4, we should never accept the justification. It's always been done this way. No one's had a problem before. I do not care if no one has raised this issue for 7 years. The fact is it's simply an issue, and all managers will probably agree with that. So we shouldn't accept the justification because nobody has raised this issue before, therefore it's okay with everybody else. Chances are others simply wanted a peaceful life and didn't want to actually raise it. Or this person simply wore out other managers. Or maybe this person had alliances, but we should never accept the justification that because no one's raised it to me before, therefore I can't be a bully. That's completely and utterly inappropriate and not particularly effective either. Number 5, any complaint resolution process has to be laid out very, very clearly and very transparently, and it's really important as an organisation we follow this. It's in all the cases I've dealt with where a company has been held to account for a process that's been poor, it's not because the process was unfair, sometimes it was, it's because the company didn't follow their own internal policies. So it's really important that those policies are really clear, and it's put in place, and it's explained, and it's followed very, very clearly, both mechanically in terms of the steps, but also in terms of the guiding principles that combine that whole complaint laying and investigation process that has to be in place as well. It's also really important, as my final comment, I'm quite passionate about this, that bullying be treated not as a health and safety issue, but as a performance issue. As long as we treat bullying in the workplace as a health and safety issue, then it means that the focus will always be on the victim. In other words, why is this person feeling bullied when this other person who's been working with this person for the last 6 months or 6 years doesn't? In other words, the finger tends to get pointed at the victim as to how resilient they are. And their resilience does matter, don't get me wrong, it's actually quite important. But at the end of the day, bullying is a performance issue, because bullying is a productivity divider. Managing bullying effectively is actually a productivity multiplier. If we put aside all the fines, all the compliance costs, all the legal costs, leave and everything else like that, exit packages, whatever, the fact is bullying costs productivity. By doing some very simple mathematics on some very conservative modelling internationally, the international average of gross domestic product that's impacted by bullying at work is 3.5%. That's a lot of money, that's a lot of downtime, that's a big economic cost. And so no matter what we invest in managing bullying effectively, which really is around upskilling our managers and our ability to deal with things early on effectively, it will pay off tremendously in terms of added creativity, improved communication, greater uptake of ideas, greater adaptability to change, high engagement levels, everything else like that, that while they may be very intangible, they add to productivity incredibly. So there are a few tips around managing workplace bullying, and if you're an HR or a manager or an employee at work, I hope you found those worthwhile. Thanks for watching.